Hello, welcome to IACP Tech Talk. I'm very excited to be here and appreciate you all joining. I got about 30 minutes to tell you guys about a pretty exciting new product. My name is Fritz Reber. I'm a retired police captain from the Chula Vista Police Department. I'm excited to be joined by Lieutenant Jim Munro with the Clovis Police Department. He'll come in and introduce himself a little bit later. But let me first just jump right into this because we have limited time. I wanted to tell you about the product that we're going to be talking about. And again, it's called Live911, and it's developed by Higher Ground, a logger company. Live911 is essentially, and it's more than just this, but essentially the key aspect of it, the differentiating aspect of it, is it takes the incoming 911 call audio that call takers hear and streams it out to police officers in the field in real time so that they hear the conversation and they can gather information that they otherwise wouldn't get from this call. They're essentially eavesdropping in on the call taker process. This is an idea I came up with when I was a lieutenant at the Chula Vista Police Department. I was put in charge of the comm center, or the PSAP, Public Safety Entering Point. And quite honestly, when I took over, I had no idea what a PSAP was. And that's how little I think many officers in the field understand about the discipline of dispatching. And this serves as a window to what they do and how important what they do is to overall operations. And so the idea is essentially to allow officers, based on their geographic location, to hear incoming nearby 911 calls in real time so that they not only get the location of the caller that pops up on the screen, but they hear the conversation, they hear the tone of voice, they hear the influx, they hear the background noise, they get a sense of what's happening in real time. So not only do they have the ability to start heading towards the location of priority calls and incidents, but they also get all the information so that they can develop a viable plan and coordinate with other responding officers. I think Lieutenant Jim Munro will be able to tell you more about what the end user experience is of the technology, but let me tell you about some of the benefits. Some of the obvious benefits are giving the officers enough information to be able to de-escalate major incidents. There's something called dispatch priming, and that's where officers are basically primed by what they hear over the dispatch on how they should respond and what the nature of the incident is. Sometimes, most of the time, this doesn't have a negative impact, but sometimes it can result in unfortunate or catastrophic circumstances. The most obvious and glaring is the Tamir Rice incident, where if you listen to the actual 911 call, it was a relatively unconcerned caller saying that he was in the park and there was someone that looks like a juvenile playing with a gun, which looks like a gun. It might be a toy. These little suppositions didn't come through. Dispatchers tend to not want to put false ideas in officers' heads, so they just relay the facts. And of course, the officers in this case responded with tragic consequences on a report of a man with a gun, which came out over the radio. Had they been listening simultaneously to the 911 caller, they would have heard the lack of urgency in the caller. They have heard the suppositions that it was probably a juvenile, probably a toy. They would have realized it was no one in danger. It wasn't an active shooter situation, and they could have not only headed that way and reduced the response time, but been able to formulate a plan that was appropriate for the circumstances. Another incident is the arrest of Henry Louis Gates. Many of you may remember that back in 2009, he was arrested trying to get into his own house. The caller had called 911, relaying information about someone trying to open a door. They actually thought it looked fairly innocent, just thought they should call the police. And the dispatcher, put it out or put in details that made it seem like it was a burglary in progress, and the officers responded based on that information. I think as if the officers could have heard the narrative of the 911 call in real time, they would have had a better flavor for what actually was happening at this location and made a better decision. And this is all about better outcomes. And keep in mind, there is no other technology out there that does what Live911 does. The idea of streaming audio to the officers in the field is a very unique idea. It really hasn't been considered, and Live911 is the first one to enable it. We're having tremendous success rate in the field in the short time that's been out there. So again, let me go over the benefits. It closes this gap of the time someone picks up the phone to call 911 to the time that a dispatcher is able to take that information, type it in to the CAD system, just what they can realistically type in, and send it over to the dispatcher, who has to, among all the other calls, manage. They must read the details. We all understand the game of telephone. We all understand what it gets lost from the spoken word to the written word. And so during this time, officers can hear what's happening. They can start towards that location. They receive training, so they're not jumping calls, but they basically can, instead of just randomly driving, they can drive towards a location, make a game plan, stage if they need to, rally appropriate resources, non-lethal resources, all these things that they just don't have access to now based on the way the system works. It basically closes this existing gap. And we're having, and I can't wait for Lieutenant Munro to talk about how they've been using it. We've got several other agencies that have been using it, and in the first months of it, it's actually saved lives. There are people walking around today because the agencies that serve those communities have Live911. I have not I'm obviously biased, but in my 27 years in law enforcement, I haven't seen a technology that has so transformed the capabilities of everyday patrol. Generally speaking, it's a way to reduce response times, and every once in a while, it's a way for officers to save a life. Having said that, again, I'm very pleased to have Lieutenant Jim Munro from the Clovis Police Department, one of the more innovative police departments, I think largely due to his leadership, and certainly the chief he works with has entrusted him to really drive a lot of technology, and this is just one of them. So Jim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Fritz. Appreciate that. It's great to have good partners like you, and of course Chula Vista PD as well to help us lead the way. My name is Jim Munro. I'm a lieutenant with the Clovis Police Department. We're located here in Central California, notably right next to Fresno, which is a city of about 500,000. We're a city of about 120,000 or so. We're located right next to the Sierra Mountain Range, so we have some skiing about 45 minutes up the hill. The beach is about 2.5 hours to our west, so not a bad area to be in. Our city is, it's relatively large, I guess, all things considered. We're about 24 square miles, have just over 100 cops, although that number seems to dwindle each day. And we were voted the best city in California to raise a family, which is a good thing. And then last but not least, Clovis is a great place to live, not only for families, but for everybody. For the last, however many years, I can't even remember, Clovis is the safest city in the valley. And it's because of, Live911 and programs like that, and technology that we're using that's really benefiting our officers out in the field to decrease response times, to keep them safer, to keep our citizens safer. And we want to try and leverage whatever technology is out there that is actually good working technology that'll help us complete our mission every day. And I've got to tell you that we invest a lot in technology and a lot in new programs. And Live911 for us, at least within this last year, has been really one of those game-changing technologies that has allowed us, like Fritz said earlier, we've saved several lives with it. There are people, no joke, that are walking around today because of our quick response with Live911, and it's kept our officers safer as well, which I'll talk about here in just a few. So let me click to the next slide here. So I have a chief that supports innovation technology. It makes it very easy for me to try and get into kind of groundbreaking technologies, and he supports it as long as it's going to be beneficial to the agency, and as long as it's is going to keep our officers safe and our city safe. And Live911 has done just that. So some of the things we're working on currently, we have a video unit. I have actually three video techs on staff that support our camera network of 450 plus cameras throughout the city in strategic locations and most major intersections, along with, of course, LPR cameras as well. We have modeled a DFR, drone as a first responder program, after Chula Vista down in Southern California, and we're doing it kind of just on a smaller basis, but also looking to go beyond visual line of sight as we speak. And we have used Live911 for that as well. But what we're using Live911 for the most is live streaming these 911 calls directly out to our officers in the field. So that's where we're using it in Clovis. That's where we found the value. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and how we have been able to be successful. So let me see if I can forward this presentation here. There we go. So out in the field, the real world use has been a great success. We started this very small. I think we were the second or third agency in the nation to roll this out, and we were one of the beta testers. We started with a very small group. I started with 10 officers, and really quickly after rolling it out, I had people knocking on my door saying, hey, this is super cool. I've heard great things. Can I please be a tester? We then went to 20 officers, and after that, things were going so well that we opened it up to all of our patrol. So we have approximately 75 officers in patrol, and I would guesstimate that right now about 75% of those 75 are actually using Live911. It has been an optional thing for us. We never make anybody listen to it if they don't want to. But we've had several critical incidents and several saves that have really sparked the interest for people to listen to 911 where maybe they didn't want to before, because it's just, you know, a lot of people thought of it as another distraction. You have the MDC, you have the radio, you have the stereo going, plus, you know, you're trying to watch your 6 all the time. But the really neat thing about Live911 is you can listen to it as much or as little as you want to. You can mute it, you can turn it off. And one of the neat things about it is basically the geofence, or the distance filter, right? So if you're an officer, like in our city, a lot of our officers, it's a good sized city, but it's small. It's not like a Los Angeles. So they like to listen to everything happening in the city. They'll open their geofence or distance filter up to 6 to 7 miles. That'll get the whole city. But some people like to just take it down to, you know, whatever's around them. So let's just say maybe a half a mile or a quarter mile. And you can do that. It's completely configurable to whatever the officer wants. So the officer can listen to whatever they want, and it's not a global setting. So that's really nice. Like I said, you can mute it, you can dismiss it, and you can just decide not to listen at all if you want. But we highly encourage our officers to log in at the beginning of the day, have it available, and I'll tell you why we do that here shortly as soon as we move forward in the presentation. I'll give you some really good examples. Some of these examples are some of the medical aid saves that we've had. So it's funny because Fritz and I, we communicate quite often. I'm always sending him success stories because it seems like, you know, once a week or once every couple of weeks, we have either a save life or some really great story because of Live911, and I always like to tell them these great success stories. So medical aid saves, we've had several of those. I keep a running list of all of our saves. We've had several of those. We had a hot proud burglary in progress. This was just about 2 months ago, middle of the night. The graveyard units are out there. Cool thing was there was nothing else going on, but the officers heard the transmission of the Live911 call coming in. Before it was even dispatched, they were able to start that direction. This was a female home alone with her 3 kids in the house, and there was a gentleman on the side of the house with a knife trying to bust in the door. The officers listened to the 911 call all the way until they arrived on scene. They knew what the victim was thinking. They knew what the suspect looked like. They knew where the suspect was. And kind of one of the neat things that came from this, from the officer and the sergeant that responded on scene, is he said, listen, you know, typically you get dispatched over the radio and you think, well, is this real? Is this not real? Listening to this Live911 audio, these officers knew right away that this was the real deal. They knew that this was a single female at home with her 3 children, barricaded upstairs, trying to keep her kids safe. And they took it seriously. It helped them respond in safely. They knew exactly what they were looking for, all because they could hear that Live911 audio coming through. Another great success story, this was also just a couple months ago. We had a gentleman call. He was basically, I think it was a suicide by cop is what it turned out to be. Obviously, he wasn't successful because he's still living today, which is a great thing, and we attribute a lot of that to Live911. He called in, was in one of our community parks, said he was armed with a gun, and basically he wanted the officers to come at him so he could shoot. Well, the neat thing was, as they were negotiating with this guy, the sergeant and the negotiator on scene were able to be right next to the police car, listening to the Live911 audio coming back and forth between him and dispatch and they were able to, make a tactical plan and peacefully resolve the situation because they could hear exactly what he was saying and what the dispatchers were saying. So that was a great success story. Last but not least is that earlier this summer we had an OIS at a Walmart parking lot. And 6 of our officers actually ended up shooting on this one. Unfortunately, the gentleman did die, but the way this all went down was really, I'd say, probably one of our very, very first success stories with Live 911. Once again, it was late at night. Live 911 call comes in. The officers are out in the field in their patrol car. They are listening to it, and they respond to a man with a rifle call in the Walmart parking lot. If you go to the Clovis Police Department YouTube page, you can actually watch this video, the body camera, and you can hear Live 911 running in the background, and you can hear what the officers are hearing as they are responding. Make a long story short, as the officers are responding, they could hear the gentleman who was suicidal. They did not know that at the time, but he was calling in a man with a rifle in the Walmart parking lot. They respond, and they can hear this guy's tone of voice. They can hear where he's saying the man with the rifle is. And right away, as they're listening to this audio, it clicked that this was probably a suicide by cop. In our debrief afterwards, the officer said Live 911 was essential in their response because, number one, that was going through their head when it may not have otherwise. It was just coming over the radio. They heard where this gentleman was. They could hear what he could see, and they could hear what dispatch was saying. So this allowed them to respond in tactfully. One of our officers said that he was planning on going in one way, but after hearing the Live 911 audio, he actually went a different direction. Which if he had gone in that way, it would have put him directly in the line of fire right where this guy was looking. And they attributed that to the success of Live 911. So like I said, check out our YouTube page. That video is on there, and it's a really real life example of how we have used Live 911 out in the field. So those are just a few success stories, and we have several more, but obviously time we can't share them all. Now, I'll turn it back over to Fritz. He'll talk about a few more that he's aware of throughout the country.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, really good stories, and cops love to tell stories, and that's the best way to learn how it works. And what you were just talking about is, the benefit of this technology. It actually works, and it actually saved lives. It's only been around, like I said, maybe 6 months. You guys were the first. Polk County was another beta tester, and now it's getting out more broadly past beta. So we're excited that this product's on the market. Some of the wins that Chula Vista, which developed the product with Higher Ground and was the first agency, and Polk County have. And I don't think it's actually on here, but there was one just March 27th, so a couple weeks ago in Chula Vista. The officer was just clearing up from another call. He just had Live 911 in the background, scanning it like you would any other frequency. He hears this guy come on the air, and it's a medical call that his friend was not breathing and probably an overdose. The officer looks up and sees the little dot on the map at the interface inside the MDC and says, "Oh, I'm like 100 yards from that guy right now." So he gets on the air and tells dispatch, "Hey, I'm listening to Live 911. I'll be out on that non-breather at XYZ location." And he gets out and goes down and gives a Narcan to the person and revives them. And this is minutes before fire arrives. And as in a lot of times, medical calls don't even go to officers. So that's another person who's now alive because that officer was listening to Live 911, was nearby. Some of the other wins the Polk County has talked about is the officer heard a caller saying that the suspect was leaving a motel. The officer happened to be driving by as the car's pulling out. He stops the car, which would have been miles away by the time he got the call, and it turns out it was a homicide suspect. They were able to get the gun in custody. A Chula Vista officer heard a brandishing a weapon call come in, and the person was behind the car following it, giving turn-by-turn directions to the dispatch, and the officer was able to keep up with these turn-by-turns in real time. That's kind of a side benefit. Is anybody who knows when someone comes over the dispatch to say you just turned left on Main, that's usually a minute ago, so they're a mile from there. And the officer was able to catch up to the suspect, stop him, and found out that he was a member of an organized motorcycle gang and was armed with a handgun. Another call was a Chula Vista call where a woman called in. She was essentially screaming. The officers could obviously tell it was a frantic situation. They could see the location on the map, and it was really hard for dispatch to understand what the problem was. The officers responded there. By the time they got there, they realized it was a drowning child, and they were able to render aid. Chula Vista had a burglary in progress where an officer was driving to one call. Here's another call come out, happened to be across the street. He looks to his right, sees the person, sees a victim who has someone at gunpoint. It turned out to be a burglary in progress where the victim caught the person in progress and held him at gunpoint. Some that actually made the media was a Polk County arrest of 4 burglary suspects that they attributed to listening to Live 911. In fact, the Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd, had said that in implementing Live 911, they saved 3 lives in the first 30 days, including a child. And again, like I said before, all agencies find that getting, hit and run suspect, DUI suspects, any kind of moving situation where you have a person giving turn-by-turn directions to a dispatch, you're much more likely to catch up to them and know their location. So I'll turn it back over to Jim in terms of the impact of dispatch.
Yeah, thanks, Fritz. As you were going through, I was checking my email from last week, actually. I just want to kind of point this out. This is just another success story that came in. One of our officers sent me this email. He said he was listening to Live 911 and he could hear the screaming in the background of a disturbance. He arrived on scene before the call was even dispatched, and he believed, or the victim said that she believed the suspect would have killed her if we had not showed up so quickly. And so the last sentence in his email was, long story short, Live 911 was very useful in this call, greatly reduced the response time, and I strongly believe it saved her life or at least prevented more injury. And the suspect was arrested. So that literally was just last week. So these are the type of emails that I'm getting, and I've asked my staff to keep me updated as we have these success stories so that we can obviously document them and then pass them on to Fritz and his team at Higher Ground as well. So in regards to dispatch, dispatch was one of those things that was, I used to be the supervisor over dispatch. I used to be a dispatcher. I know that Fritz mentioned that he had it as well. And so dispatch obviously had their own concerns, which I understood. One of them was the example I just gave. What happens when, officers are showing up on these calls and we haven't even had a time to dispatch them, or this is going to make them answer or ask more questions than they typically would because, they can hear what the conversation is. And the big one was, well, we don't want officers listening to our 911 calls. We don't want supervisors listening to our 911 calls. We don't want anybody listening to our 911 calls. We just don't want it. So before we went live, we went and met with our dispatchers along with our supervisors and our dispatch manager and made sure that we kind of ironed this all out. Luckily, we had Chula Vista to kind of lean back on, and they had not had any of these problems at all. In fact, they had quite the opposite, where they saw so much benefit in the product, the dispatchers did. And the officers also had some really eye-opening experiences as far as dispatchers were concerned, because in listening to the calls, they realized how hard these dispatchers work. They had a newfound appreciation for the dispatchers. And, in briefings all the time, we're talking about, wow, basically we can't really fathom what dispatchers have to deal with on a daily basis. And so it's really given our staff a new appreciation for dispatchers, which is a great thing. But we made sure, like I said, with the help of the Chula Vista team, who kind of was paving this road before we got there, to make sure that we covered all of our bases, and the dispatch was on board. Dispatch understood why we were doing it. And we kind of explained, hey, listen, as officers, our conversations are recorded on body camera all day long, every day. And yes, people are not listening to them live, but this is no different than the police radio. And if it's going to save lives, save officer lives, save citizen lives, and reduce response times, this is a tool that we want to definitely use. So after we sat down and had conversation with them, there have been no issues. There have been no problems. There have been no discipline issues. And kind of the neat thing is the dispatchers, if they know, because they can see on their screen, we have our dispatchers actually log into Live 911 as well. The neat thing is it really helps them with the rapid SOS integration. They can see the caller's progress, so if they start at Clovis and 5th Street and they're in a car, they can see where that dot is putting them live, and so can the officers. But the other thing is the dispatchers can also see who's listening to the call. and they can see if the officers that are dispatched are actually listening, and they can say, listen, caller, there's a good chance right now that the officers aren't listening to your call. Please calm down and give me the information I'm needing. And that has been helpful as well. Now, in regards to the questions, it's actually cut down on the number of questions that officers would typically ask of dispatchers because they're listening. They know that dispatch has already asked the correct questions, such as, what the clothing description is, maybe what the direction of travel is. They're listening to this call live. So they don't have to pick up the microphone over the radio and say, hey, can you ask what direction, what clothing? They're already hearing it. It's actually cut down on radio transmissions as well, which has been great. So the whole dispatch thing, we were very concerned about that at first because we thought that was going to be a huge roadblock to try and get past. But they've actually really embraced it, and it's been very, very good. So like I said, dispatchers are getting as much information as they possibly can. They know the officers are hearing it out in the field, and they've been very, very receptive. We have protocols in place that if the officers hear the call before it gets radio dispatched, what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to say, and that way they can go on scene, like that example I just got, before it even gets broadcast over the radio. So all in all, dispatch has been great. Fritz, did you have anything else from your experience at Chula Vista and what you've heard from the Chula Vista dispatchers?
Yeah, no, you covered a lot of it. The fear that they had just went away when they saw it in action. They use it there as well. The dispatchers open it up and monitor it and use it for the location of the caller, and then the ability to see where the officers are in relation to that and which ones are listening. Obviously, they mute it because they're hearing all that information through their normal process. And again, this doesn't change the way they do business. If everyone turned off Live911, the operations would stay the same. It's completely voluntary, even though you'll find that most will see value in opening it up on the program and at least logging it in so that their location can be shared. And then some may mute it if it's really busy, or out in the field, they may mute it if it's really busy, and then pipe in when it makes sense. Maybe some of the newer officers may not want to listen to it at first because you got to train your ear, etc. So it really is not meant to interfere with existing operations, and dispatchers see it as a value add and not anything that they need to retrain on or changes the way they do business at all.
Yeah, I will say just one other thing. We're talking a lot about it actually being out in the field. But as a lieutenant and watch commander, I find myself using it a ton actually at my desk. I'm in the station a lot. And the neat thing is I can hear a 911 call come in. And, sometimes it takes, depending on how busy we are, it'll take a minute or two to actually get out over the radio. So I can get a jump on if I need to jam out of the building and respond somewhere, I can get a jump on that. It also allows me to kind of start making a plan for what we got going on. If it's a multi-casual incident, a critical incident, you get a minute or two of time that you wouldn't have had before to try and, think that through and respond. So it's been very advantageous from a watch commander's point of view inside a station as well. One thing that we haven't really talked much about. So Fritz, I think I turn this back over to you, at least for now, right? If I'm not mistaken. And I'll close with just saying this is, I think I said it earlier, is that, I've used this with Fritz and said this is a game-changing technology. It really is, and I don't want to overuse that, but it really is. Of all the things that we've rolled out, from e-ticketing to our CAD app to drones out in the field, and just all the technology that we have thrown out there in the last few years, this is one that is really making a difference. It really is saving lives. It's relatively inexpensive for what you're getting. And there's no way that we're going to live without it from this point forward. So I highly encourage, if you're even interested, to reach out to Fritz, reach out to Higher Ground. We've had great success. If you have any further questions, feel free to get a hold of me at Clovis PD. I'll be happy to talk with you. But all positive things so far, and we've been live now for just over a year. It's been great. So Fritz, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, no, thanks to you and Chief Fleming. It's been huge that you guys helped develop this product, and the product that it is due to the product development feedback that you and your team gave Higher Ground on a regular basis. Really can't appreciate it enough. And then let me just close by, we didn't do a real deep technical dive on how this works and how it's integrated in the dispatch system. So I'll have some contact info after that. Please reach out to me or Jim or Higher Ground. If you have any questions, the Higher Ground has a great live911.com is a great website that has a lot of this information on there, and it does a deeper dive. Higher Ground, a little bit more about how it developed. When I've had the idea as a lieutenant, I tried to find someone else who could develop it. Higher Ground is a logger company. They've been around since 1973. They have great products. One is Capture 911, and now of course Live911. I'm sorry, Capture 911 and now Live911. So they really had obviously the experience in selling to PSAPs and products that are tested and really shared the vision when they said, yeah, this is just, we already developed monitor clients that let you listen in on dispatchers for quality assurance. We'll just change the user interface and make it a tactical tool for officers in the field. And now, of course, as Jim said, there's stakeholders in dispatch and EOC centers and watch commanders, supervisors in the field that also see value in this. So yeah, I guess we'll just wrap up there. Again, it was developed with the help of Chula Vista Police Department, so I don't want to leave them out. Don Redmond and Eric Wood there really are the ones that took the idea and worked with Higher Ground to develop it in coordination with Clovis as well as Polk County Sheriff there. And like I said, it's just getting out into agencies everywhere, and I think the value add that it does for operations in terms of call response, resource management, and essentially just saving lives is exciting. And I hope you guys found this presentation interesting.